Hello Scrap Academy, Laura Rumble here with today's video, which is a recipe challenge. I don't usually do recipe challenges. I'm much more a fan of a mood board or a sketch. But I'm going to take you through, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, so 1 sheet of card, 2 photos, 3 patterned papers and 4 textures. So I've got my card and my photos, I've got 3 pattern papers from Sticker Kitten, and for my textures I'm going to go with vellum, heat embossing, thread and dry embossing. So this is a Score Pal board which you use with a bone folder, and you deboss lines into your card or paper. I have switched from 12 by 12 to A4, so I'm still using up my 12 by 12 paper but cutting it down to A4, which I know makes no sense. 12 by 12 albums are just too expensive for me to justify, so A4, which you can pick up from Smith's or whatever, much more reasonable. So I'm starting off with my dry embossing. This is a board that has lots of little grooves in, and you push your bone folder or stylus or anything that's a bit pointy but not sharp, and it makes a line. I realise watching this footage back that it's not the greatest thing to do for a video because it barely shows. In real life it looks really nice and obvious, and I really enjoy the texture it adds to the page. Video, well, it doesn't show so much. You do not need a board to do it. If you have a ruler and a magazine or a piece of foam or something, you can get the same effect. Now for my 3 pattern papers. These are all from a collection called Celestial, so they're sort of galaxy, sky kind of patterns in various colours, and I thought I would make strips and have a stripe of strips across the page, mixing up my colours. I'm having some darks, some lights, and that brighter purple has got a little bit of a kick as well. So that's what I'm going to go for. I'm going to cut them down, not too accurately, they're not going to be the same length, but I do want to make sure that the lines are, that I'm making them rectangles and then they're not wonky. Quite a few of my cuts, if you see me double cutting, it's because the first cut was just too wonky. I need to straighten it up again with a second trim. So they are going on across the page. This is where my photos will sit. As I said at the beginning, recipe challenges are not necessarily my forte. I usually avoid them, and even though I've thought things out here and I've got my 3 and my 4 textures and my 2 photos and my 1 piece of cardstock, I still I change my mind and have other ideas. So this, what you're watching here, I'm matting my 2 photos on 1 piece of vellum to give like 1 photo matte, and then I change my mind and undo it. The idea of doing 1 photo matte rather than 2 is just unifying the photos and bringing them together. I think if you matte them separately, they're kind of 2 separate photos, and I wanted them to be 1. So I have at least got the size and shape there of the vellum mat that I want, and now I'm going to cut it out again. This time not sticking my photos on first, because I want to add some of my 3rd texture, which is heat embossing, onto the vellum. Vellum is a really good surface for heat embossing on. It's very thin, so the embossing powder melts very quickly. You probably could burn the vellum if you kept your heat gun in one place for too long. So it's a good idea to let your heat gun heat up properly before you start and to keep it moving over the surface. Now I have just run my embossing ink pad over the edges of my vellum, and I have recently re-inked my ink pad, and it was far too juicy for this technique. So I'm using a paintbrush to just dust off and really I only wanted 2 or 3 millimeters of uneven embossing powder around the edge. So I'm heating my heat gun up. I'm tidying while I'm waiting for it to get hot, and I am taking it to the vellum, keeping it moving, and as soon as the powder is melted, moving on to the next spot. Now, as I keep saying, I keep changing my mind in this. When I took the photos off the first vellum mat, I damaged the edges slightly. So, although I'm going to try and put them back on as they were, it's very minor, but I can tell that the edge of the photos they're a little bit bent and puckered, and I wasn't liking that. I'm going to do another swerve from the original plan, and I'm going to chop my photos down smaller. At the moment they've got a little white border on them, which I was liking, but that's going to come off. As I had used my Tombow Mono Multi to stick them to the vellum, the back of the photo was still gummy, so I've dusted a bit of talc over them so that I don't get that stick all over my guillotine. And I'm just taking a couple of mils from each side of the photo, and that obviously means that the photo mat, the vellum that I've embossed, is going to be the wrong size, and that's going to need to be trimmed down as well. However, this is going to give me the look minus the border that I originally wanted, with just a small bit of embossing adding texture to the edge of the vellum photo mat. So I'm trimming that up, and this is pretty much the idea that I was going for to begin with. So I'm going to pop that down onto my layout with some foam squares. These foam squares are really annoying and stupid and irritating. You try and take one off and you get like 4 or 5. They're not cut properly, and they all stick to each other, which is why it looks like a hot mess on the back there. But it doesn't matter, because that's going down to the card, so we're not going to see that. So there's my photo in place. I now need to work on my title, and I've decided I'm going to try and add 2 of my textures, so the heat embossing and the vellum, into my title as well. So I've got some plain white alpha stickers, and I'm going to just swipe them with the ink. I've wised up a little bit, and I've wiped or dabbed a little, some of the excess ink off, but I'm still just knocking off any extra powder with a paintbrush to get just I don't want too much powder, I don't want it to be solid silver. That is a brilliant effect, and it's definitely one to try if you're new to embossing. Heat embossing your alpha stickers gives them a completely different look. However, this time I'm just wanting a little bit at the bottom and a little bit at the top. So using my brush to end up with just the right amount. And I think my camera stopped there. So they are now heat embossed, and I'm going to pop these onto a little banner of vellum. That's just bringing in the ingredients in the recipe. So my 4 textures of bringing the vellum in. I think if things are on the page in more than one place, it just gives you a more cohesive design overall. So repeating the element of the vellum, repeating the element of the heat embossing is just bringing the page together as one design. as I have heat embossed the alphas, even though they have stick on the back, the stick's not reliable anymore. So I'm adding just a few dots of glue behind and adding them onto my vellum banner. And then the trick with vellum and glue is to hide the glue because it will show through the vellum. So I'm going to add tiny dots of glue to the back of the alpha stickers to adhere that in place. My fourth texture is thread, and as you might know by now, I have a vast collection of different coloured threads, and I pulled out 3 that matched the pattern papers, and just having a few messy tangles dotted around the page. I tried one underneath the title, but I didn't like that, so I'm just going to pop up one of the foam squares from behind the photo and just tuck these thread bundles underneath. I do like the texture it adds. I like the messiness, but it's also contained messiness, if that makes sense. Popping my title down underneath my photos, and I will journal, but do that off camera after the photos have been taken. I'm using my ruler just to make sure I get it fairly central. It's not probably millimetre perfect, but it's central enough to make it work for me. And I've got to the end and I'm just checking that I have gone and followed the recipe and got my 1, 2, 3, 4, which I have. I decide I'm going to finish off with some messy paint splatters. I don't have a silver paint, so I am mixing some pearly mica powder into like a graphite kind of paint, which maybe you could pass off as silver. I mean, it's dark grey with a bit of shimmer in it, but hey, it's work with what you've got. I am making sure to cover my photos. I do have a paint splatter on my baby's head. That cleans off fairly easily, and there's the final layout. So that's a 1, 2, 3, 4 recipe, 1 sheet of cardstock, 2 photos, 3 pattern papers, and 4 textures. So that is your homework in the Scrap Academy for this week, and I can't wait to see what you make. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe and all that jazz, and I'll see you next time.